I feel like if men went through the menopause, that's the only thing we'd ever be able to talk about.
It's so true. It's so true. There'd be like conferences all the time.
There'd be like a show presented by Jeremy Clarkson where they like tried out different, I don't know, HRT or, techniques to like make life easier for them.
Hello and welcome to Love Lives, a podcast from The Independent where I, Olivia Petter, speak to different guests every fortnight about the loves of their lives. Today I am very excited to be joined by one of my favourite writers, the best-selling author, award-winning journalist, fellow podcaster, and I'm fairly reason one of the people who is part of the reason why I'm doing what I am doing here today. It's Bryony Gordon.
Oh, that's the nicest thing ever.
I have more. So having started in journalism as an intern at the Daily Express, Bryony has since achieved that rare feat of becoming a very famous journalist and penning several books, including The Wrong Knickers, Mad Girl, and now Mad Woman. So, welcome to Love Lives, Bryony.
Thank you for having me, Olivia. You're a very famous newspaper journalist as well.
No, don't be silly. I really do mean that because I remember reading The Wrong Knickers when it came out. I don't know, what year did that book come out?
It was like 800 years ago. It came out, do you know what? It came out in 10 years ago. 2014.
Yeah, so I read that when I was at university, and I think that was genuinely one of the things that made me feel like I want to go into journalism, which maybe is quite antithetical, actually,
quite dark,
given what the book is about.
There's a lot of, I hope your experience was less kind of like chaotic than mine.
As I said that, I realised, I was like, maybe. But anyway, that's besides the point. It introduced me to your work.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So the first question I want to ask you, because I know that this is how you used to start all of your episodes of the Mad World podcast, which you did for a while, is how are you really today?
I am, okay, how am I really? So I'm good. I'm very aware that I'm in sort of book promo cycles. So it's a bit like being on drugs. You know this, you know, like you're sort of running off like coffee, not drugs anymore for me in my case, but that, and it's like I have to be quite careful that I don't sort of spiral and like lose sight of what's important, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm good right now because the book seems to be doing well. But, and also just it's, I guess because it's nice, you write about this stuff, you know what it's like, where you're kind of pouring your heart out onto the page and it's, you're writing about quite dark stuff. And then it's good to know that it chimes with other people, I guess. And that's like this to me as well is like the best bit is like meeting the people that read read books because they're my tribe or I'm part of their tribe. I feel like each of the books, like even The Wrong Knickers, is me sort of saying, if you've been through this, don't worry, I have too, and it's okay. And why don't we all hang around this little book together? Because it's better than being alone in our homes thinking we're freaks. That's kind of what each book I've written, I think, has done. So The Wrong Knickers was like that chaotic period of my 20s where I was single and, but also, just like clueless. It's okay to swear?
Yes.
And not very well really for a lot of it. But, and I wrote it when my daughter, I literally wrote it on maternity leave. And I thought, I'm through that now. My life is saved. Oh, wow.
I want to come back to that because that's definitely one of the things I want to ask you about. But start us off by telling us about Mad Woman because it follows on from your 2016 book, Mad Girl, which was about OCD and your mental health. And so tell us the difference and the progression has brought you from Mad Girl to Mad Woman.
So Mad Girl really, for me, it kind of changed my life and my career, certainly. So it's writing about this stuff. So I've had OCD since I was a little girl and, really crippling. And we talk about, everyone kind of goes, I'm a bit OCD, you should see my sock drawer. And I was like, it's always the sock drawer. My husband jokes, I wish you had the good type of OCD. Of course, there is no good type of OCD, but my OCD has always involved very dark, intrusive thoughts. So I always describe OCD as like your brain refusing to acknowledge what your eyes can see. So like that your hands are clean, or the oven is off, or the hair straighteners are off, or the bump in the road you've gone over is a speed bump and not a child. And it's the same with thoughts. So we all have thousands of thoughts every day. And we are not all of our thoughts. And we've all had that thought, what if someone hands you their baby at a party? You're like, what if I just threw the baby on the floor? Or you're like on the tube and you're like, what if I just jumped in front of the tube? But most people, we go, oh no, that's obviously I'm not going to do that, and we just miss it and we get on with our day. But with OCD, you become so distressed by the thoughts. You think that you ruminate on them to check you're not the thoughts. So basically, decades of my life was spent like checking that I wasn't a serial killing paedophile. You can see why people don't talk about that type of OCD, right? So I wrote about that. And I remember when I pitched the book and when I like did the breakdown, and I remember someone in the publishing industry saying, you can't write about that. And I was like, no, but that, if I can't write that, I can't write this book.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I stood my ground on that, because it was like this visceral, like shame, and that sent me, it resonated with a lot of people and sent me into this world of mental health campaigning. I set up Mental Health Mates, which is, a place for people to go for walks and talks together without fear of judgment. And I ran, London Marathon. I ran it one year in my underwear to show that exercise is for everyone. Like my whole life sort of changed because of it. But I've also learned a lot about myself. And in a way, I was quite naive when I wrote Mad Girl. Like I definitely thought that mental health issues were like, oh, there's a chemical imbalance, just take a pill, and there is an element of that. But I really realized during the pandemic, when I became very depressed, it was really weird, because I was like, it was the first time in my life I'd been depressed, and I looked around and I'm like, everyone else is depressed too. And that's totally appropriate. And I've started to realize since Mad Girl that a lot of mental illness and mental health issues, they're really appropriate. They're like sophisticated ways of your brain telling you that something is not right in your life. And a lot happened to me. I got sober after Mad Girl. But then in pandemic, I developed kind of binge eating disorder, and the OCD came back really badly. And I discovered that I was in early menopause, and there was so much I wanted to write about. But really what I wanted to say to people was, I really realized, I was like, oh my God, I've never been mad. I've never been mad. Actually, the subtitle of the book is How to Survive a World that kind of wants you to think you're the problem. And I realized I'm not a problem. Like I want to say to women, you're not the problem, you're the solution, babes. And I think we're so gaslit as women, especially, into believing that we are the problem. And the more I learned about the link between hormones and mental health, also just living in a society that is not set up for us in any way still. I'm like, of course, so many of us have mental health issues. So that's what Mad Woman really is about. It's a sort of, it's me saying you're not mad, you're not a problem, you are the solution.
Yeah, and I also love the way that you have differentiated between the meaning of mad in Mad Girl and Mad Woman, because in Mad Woman you said, Mad Girl was sort of about mental health, and Mad Woman is kind of more about mad in the sense of rage, and
anger,
specifically female rage, which again is something that we are told to suppress and to withhold.
Yeah. And even in the bringing this book out, I've had to stop myself from doing that thing of like apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry for promoting my book. And I'm like, why? Why am I sorry? This is something I've worked on. And, I definitely, the need as well, because for me, I've realized what OCD is and was this kind of very, very, extreme way of my brain making sure that I was good, that I was a good girl. Because if I could follow these rules and check these things, then I wouldn't be bad. And we know as women that being, as a girl, being a bad girl is like, like even Rihanna taking that on didn't change things that much. And, for me, it was this obsession with being good. Like, I need to be good. And that ran through Mad Girl as well. Like, it was like my way of going, I'm not any of these things. I am a good person. And Mad Woman's a bit of me reclaiming it, going, actually, sometimes I am bad. Sometimes I am. And that is okay, because I'm a human being. And I don't like the way we hold still women to different standards than we do men. So yeah, absolutely. That is the kind of the rage. I don't, but it's been so revelatory to me, that realizing that it's okay to be bad, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things you quote in the book, which is something I always return to because I just find it so ridiculous and hilarious, is the word hysteria comes from the Greek word for womb.
Yeah.
And you talk about that. It's like, and your friend says, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. But also it's that thing of like, hysterical my arse.
Yeah.
Like I always think, you know, it's so interesting with all the chat about menopause now, you know, and you can see there's starting to be a backlash about all the, you know, about the chat, and from women as well. From women who, older women who've gone through it and go, well, it was fine for me. You're making a bit of a fuss about nothing. And I'm like, that's okay. Lucky you if you sailed through it and there were no problems. Brilliant. But like, can you accept that that's not the case for all women? And I was like, I feel like if men went through the menopause, that's the only thing we'd ever be able to talk about. You know?
It's so true. It's so true. There'd be like conferences all the time.
There'd be like a show presented by Jeremy Clarkson where they like tried out different, I don't know, HRT or, you know, techniques to like make life easier for them. Like I feel so acutely this is still such a huge issue, and we like to think, oh, it's the year 2024, you know, we've gone forward, and I'm like, I mean, not enough.
No, definitely not enough. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned just then was the binge eating and how that developed in lockdown. And in one of the chapters, I'm going to quote because you write it so brilliantly. You write, "In the dark, I eat, and I eat, and I eat until there are threads of chorizo stuck in my teeth, and my throat is dry from all the salt in the jerky, and I feel suitably sedated. Then I put the wrappers in a plastic bag and hide them down the back of the sofa. I am fine." Obviously, lockdown was an incredibly difficult time for everyone, as we've both mentioned. But at that time, what I found interesting about that was you were also writing about mental illness for another book, weren't you? You were writing about, No Such Thing as Normal, and interviewing lots of medical experts. So talk to me about what it's like to write about issues like that, while behind the scenes, you're going through something that you haven't quite registered yet, because it feels like it's something you touched on in Glorious Rock Bottom as well.
Yeah,
which was your book about sobriety.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that again is why I've written this book, because we have these notions, don't we? Like we love narratives, neat narratives, like beginnings, middles, ends, and that notion that like I faced my demons, I triumphed over adversity, and then I went off into the sunset and lived happily ever after. And that, in my experience, is not what happens. You know, I didn't even, like you say, like without even registering that there was a problem. Like I, for a while, didn't realize it was a problem, because I'd had bulimia in my 20s, but I hadn't purged, you know, since then. So I was like, I don't have a problem because I'm not purging. I'm binging at the moment. But it was like, there was still that sense, because of kind of diet culture, that was more of a moral failure than it was an eating disorder. And it was when I was interviewing people for this book, I was interviewing this eating disorders expert, and she suddenly started talking about binge eating disorder. And I was like, oh my God, this is what is going on. And it was kind of a relief, but also like another thing. But then, you know, I'm not the first alcoholic to go into recovery and cross-addict to food. Like this is the thing we talk about. There's a saying in like recovery communities, which is you deal with whatever's going to kill you first, you know? And for me, that absolutely was alcohol and cocaine. So when the pandemic came around, I was like 2.5 years sober, and I was so relieved about that. But it was a weird time. I'm sure we'll be untangling the effects of lockdowns on mental health for like decades to come. And you know, it was a kind of a coping mechanism. I couldn't sleep, and I would just go and eat vast quantities, almost like in blackout. It was like drinking, you know, except it wasn't. And so, but I also realized, you know, when I really started to think about it and do the work to kind of go into recovery from that, I realized that food was probably the first thing I ever kind of used to change the way I feel, you know. And we talk, like, food is incredibly powerful. I mean, it's a weapon of war. We see that now, you know. So, but it's the first way as children we ever learn we have power over our parents, right? So like we go, I'm not going to eat this broccoli, throw it on the floor. And it's like, oh, for the first time in my life, I can change, and so it's incredibly kind of visceral and powerful. And, and so I realized it was like, wow, this is as much a drug as cocaine or alcohol, and it's, it's all complicated. I kind of put my head above the parapet about it back in when I realized what was going on. And I sort of got a lot of messages from women saying, I have this too. And I'm really ashamed because I put on so much weight. And there to me was like, if you think of it as a weight issue, you're never going to get better. So we're kind of stuck in this, a lot of us stuck in this sort of perpetual cycle of restricting and binging. So a lot of anorexics in recovery from anorexia develop binge eating disorder. And that's just simple biology. If you've been starving yourself, your brain is telling you to eat. It's like it's a survival thing. So, that diet culture where we live in it almost kind of feeds this, pardon the pun, feeds this behavior. And so when I was writing this book, the more I thought about it and the more I looked into diet culture and how, common it is and how it still is, it just masks itself in different ways now. So now it's like blood sugar spikes.
Yeah, those patchy things,
or it's, I saw a reel the other day. I sound like 800 years old. I saw a reel the other day of this woman, like, I don't count calories. I eat for my gut, right? And then she did this video of all the things she ate in a day. And I was like, you don't need to count calories because there are no calories in this, and so gut health, while some people are very responsible, and there is, obviously a very fascinating link between our gut microbiomes and our mental health and the rest of it. But it has been taken and co-opted and all of that stuff. So diet culture is so insidious, and
and it perpetuates this obsessive thinking because if you're whatever it is, like if you're tracking your gut health, you're tracking your glucose, you're constantly thinking about food and what you're eating. And like I feel like, a couple of years ago it was the clean eating kind of phase, and I got so sucked into that. I remember spending hours watching YouTube videos about people talking about all the healthy things they were making. They would do these what I eat in a day videos, which, ostensibly look really harmless and just joyful and cheerful, but actually it's the same thing. It's like it encourages that way of thinking where you're kind of constantly monitoring what you're eating and how it's affecting your body. And I really like the way you talk about weight in the book, because one of the things you say, and you kind of frame it as like a feminist issue, because you say that, women are kind of encouraged to take up as little space as possible.
Yeah.
And so as not to threaten the patriarchy. And like, that's why the kind of conventional beauty ideals is like a small, frail woman, a fragile woman. And it's the same with age as well. And it reminds you of something that Naomi Wolf wrote about in The Beauty Myth, where she kind of talks about how, we fetishize youth in women because an older woman is probably more autonomous, has more financial independence and more kind of more power and more confidence. And it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. The kind of the weight thing is, it's like take up as little space as possible. And I think it's been really co-opted, like I see it now. I really believe that I used to I wouldn't eat anything, right? And then I was on cocaine. I was basically living off cocaine and quavers, right? Until my sort of late 30s. And then obviously, when I started eating normally, I put on weight, and the kind of visceral reaction of certainly people, below the line or whatever to that was really, they were like, you're a drain on NHS resources. And I was like, and I still get it. And I'm like, but it was like, I was much healthier. And I had to be really careful when the binge eating disorder thing and I was in treatment was to not get attached to that shame about weight, because it isn't a weight issue, it's a soul issue, right? And I definitely think that there's always been like a size 18 woman in me desperate to get out, like the whole way through my kind of teens and 20s, and she got out in her my late 30s, and I still kind of battle that misconception that because I'm bigger, I'm more unhealthy when because I don't it's so complicated, and I, it just makes me feel so sad. So sad that so many women waste so much of their precious fucking energy obsessing about the way they look, because it's like doing the patriarchy's work for them.
Yeah, it literally is. And as you mentioned, so when lockdown happened, you were 2.5 years into sobriety.
Yeah.
That must have been incredibly difficult during lockdown because I mean, obviously in lockdown, if you look at these stats, that was when a lot of people kind of veered into alcoholism because they were just at home drinking. And you write about in the book how you had a kind of momentary relapse that wasn't really a relapse, but talk to us about that, because I'm interested in the thinking behind that and the way that framed in your mind, and kind of it wasn't a relapse in the way you thought it was a relapse.
No, so 2022, January 2022, I became convinced that I'd relapsed because I'd taken some night nurse when I had COVID, and I was, because it has like a smidgen of alcohol in it, and I was obsessed, and it became like I was too scared to pick up a glass of water in case I accidentally had some gin or something like that. It was really obsessive, and I went to see my therapist, and he was like, "You have relapsed, but not on alcohol. You've relapsed on OCD." And I was like, "What?" And this was OCD. What OCD does is it also attaches to anything kind of precious in your life, because it's all about like, you're going to lose that, So sobriety was that precious thing. And I look back on it now and it's kind of almost funny, But it was really frightening.
But I think it really illuminates how little people know about OCD. Like you said earlier, like it is still so much the kind of sock drawer thing. And I hear people say it all the time, like, I'm so OCD. And I'm like, well, we've had all these conversations. I know,
so do I. And even talking about it makes me feel like, well, it was 2 years ago, but it was like, I can feel the kind of OCD in my brain sort of wakes up and goes, but maybe, like it's like such a, it was, I mean, it was delusional thinking, actually. It was delusional. It bared no resemblance to reality. And my therapist said that to me, like, I realized then that was when I realized what the OCD was a lot about having to be good, and it was about perfection.
I think it's so important to keep talking about it, because I do think that there are so many people that are probably suffering with that without realizing.
Yeah.
And I do think that they're just losing their mind, and in a very kind of undefined way. That isn't, but actually, like, no, you have this named, known condition that you can get treated for and get help from. So I think it's so important to keep talking about it and the ways that it affects people. One of the things I really want to ask you about, because it struck out to me towards the end of the book, is progesterone.
Yeah.
Because I think I've written about contraception a lot before, and I think when I got the coil fitted a couple years ago, there was no mention this will affect your mood. There was like, it's such a tiny amount of hormones, like, don't worry about it, it won't do anything. I swear to God, the coil made me very depressed.
Really?
Very cripplingly depressed. And it's only since looking into it as a journalist, and I spoke to lots of healthcare experts, and someone told me, well, some women are very sensitive to progesterone and it can affect your mood. And I just wanted to ask you about it, because I think there's one point in the book where you're terrified of thinking something has progesterone in it because of how it might affect you, or
well, I couldn't. So basically, I realized that OCD episode, which was really bad, and a friend said to me, have you thought about it might be hormonal and you might be going through perimenopause? And I was like, what? And I got my hormones done, and it turned out that like The Rock has higher levels of estrogen than me. It's like really low, and I was absolutely perimenopausal. And anyway, so I went on HRT, the estrogen, and within 2 days, it was like it was the difference between day and night. I was like, I was so much better. And then you have to take progesterone in the second half of the month, right? Okay. As part of HRT. And within 2 days, I was suicidal and weeping, and it was so noticeable. And I sort of called the doctor, and she was like, "Okay, well, we'll try and get it into you in a different way that was less kind of, so that you insert it vaginally." And same thing happened. And we kept trying different things, and she was like, you probably got progesterone intolerance. And we kind of added it all up, and I remember when I was pregnant, I was under the care of the local psychiatric team. And I remember as soon as I gave birth, it was like it lifted. And I remember my husband always saying that. It was like dealing with two different people. And it was so surprising because obviously we'd expected, God, she's going to baby, it's just going to get even worse. How is that possible? And of course, now it sort of tallies with the progesterone, it leaves your body. It was sort of noticing, and then they started talking to me about PMDD, and I was like...
Yes, which is another thing I've just written about as well.
Yeah.
But what makes me so mad, why don't we know about this
I know. And also because like for me, we didn't know about this stuff. So like my only medicine for it was alcohol and cocaine. Like I was like, I couldn't cope with, life because it was, I always remember, there was always a point in my cycle where it was like, I went from being a vaguely sane human being to just, quite a different one. And because I was drinking and drugging, I didn't know it was so difficult to know what was what. And they said to me, well, listen, you have to have progesterone. And they were like, if the last option is the coil, and if that doesn't work, you'll have to have a hysterectomy. And I was like, what? And luckily, I think the coil did work for me. They said, weirdly, it does for a lot of progesterone. I mean, I don't, but I do definitely still feel it from time to time. And, it's, again, it's like this thing that affects 1 in 20 women, but no one thinks about doing anything about it. Like we're already just having conversations about endometriosis and all those other things that, have plagued women since the dawn of time.
Oh, it just makes me so angry that this is what we have to deal with. It's like a long history of medical misogyny that just stops people from researching it, funding it, and just dismisses women as crazy. And you just think how many women are dealing with suicidal ideation, like crippling depression, alcoholism, drug addiction, all of these things purely based on hormonal changes in their body that could so easily be fixed.
And I really think it made me physically unwell because I ended up, and only because I had a female doctor, I was like fainting from palpitations, and I was just dismissed as it being, it's just hormonal, it's just stress and anxiety. Try losing weight. And I was like, try doing some exercise. I'm like, I exercise all the time. And it was only, a woman took me seriously, referred me for an ECG. And while I was having the ECG, they were like, you're in atrial fibrillation. We need to send you to hospital. And there was these 2 female paramedics who were like, of course you've never been taken seriously. You're a woman. And I felt so blessed to have those 2 women there because it made me, and it's so interesting. So I got diagnosed with an arrhythmia and I was like, what's caused this? Am I to blame? The guy was like, no, you're not, this is it's like an electrical thing in your, the chambers of your chest. And, but I swear to God, it was like a massive kick up the bum. It was like my body saying, are you going to you need to stop dismissing yourself. Like you're so depressed and you're so low and this has been so hard. Like just take some time, girl, baby. I was going to say baby girl, and look after yourself. And I swear to God, I barely get it. Yeah. I barely get it anymore.
What is coming up next for you? What can fans kind of expect of your work? I know you laugh at that, but you do have lots of fans.
Well, I don't know really. There may be a new podcast in the works.
That's exciting.
And I am doing this crazy running challenge.
Great.
I'm running the Brighton Marathon, and then I'm going to run from Brighton to London over 2 weeks. And then when I get to London, am I going to put my feet up, Olivia? No, I'm going to do the London Marathon. And this is to raise money for mental health mates.
So that's 2 marathons in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow.
And to show that exercise is for everyone.
That's amazing. And I mean, that brings us very neatly onto your first love that you've chosen for us, which is running, which you wrote a brilliant book about in 2018. And it's called Eat, Drink, Run. And there was one section at the beginning that really helped me. And basically, I think it was a few months before I read that book, that I had gone through an abortion. because of sexual assault.
I'm so sorry.
And it was horrific. And I've written about it before, talked about it before. But I read that book, and there was something in the beginning that you said that I'm going to read. You said, you urged readers to keep an open mind and said, think not about what you aren't, but what you are. Remember that one day things could happen to you that you wouldn't be able to believe right now. The most astonishing, amazing things. Trust me when I say all you have to do is hold on. And it's such simple advice, like just say, just hold on. But honestly, those are words that I still return to all the time when something feels really difficult and really painful. And I just want to ask, well, I want to say thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
But I also want to ask you about how running came into your life and how it was so transformative to you. Because it is like, it's so beneficial. It's like flushing the toilet in your brain.
Yeah. Well, I think also, you got me a bit emotional now, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. I always thought exercise was like a punishment. It was like a form of punishment, and it was about making me smaller, and I hated it because I wasn't very good at it. Like I wasn't fast. I wasn't, strong. I wasn't anything. I was always the last to be picked in PE. And then I remember being really unwell with OCD, and everyone was like, exercise helps. And I was like, oh, what do experts know? Like, I tried to find the exact combination of alcohol and drugs that would make my mental health better, and it only made it worse. And so I was like, I'm going to try running. And I remember going out one day, and I don't know how I even got myself out of the house. I was that like, and I remember like putting on, like, I didn't have running trainers. So I put on Converse, and then I had like a pair of my husband's tracksuit bums and a Star Wars t-shirt, like a normal bra. And then I remember leaving the house and being like, I'm going to need water or I'm going to die, and going back in, and all I could find was one of my daughter's like sippy cups. I mean, God knows what I look like, and it doesn't really matter, but I did feel better. And and that just kind of carried on. And then I don't know, and then I signed up to do the London Marathon in 2017 when the official charity of the London Marathon was Heads Together, which is the mental health thing that the now Prince and Princess of Wales and Prince Harry had created. And they'd kind of got me involved. And I really was like the most insane year of my life, to be honest, because then I trained for the marathon. I definitely thought, I'm going to do this because this might stop me drinking. And I did stop drinking for like the duration of actually running the marathon, but it made me realize, I was like, shit, I've got a problem here. And yeah, so I did the marathon, and then I pretty soon after washed up in rehab. But running is always...
Was it very soon after the marathon?
Yeah, so the marathon was April 2017,
yeah.
And I ended up in rehab in August. And because I think it showed me a different way of living as well. And it showed me exercise as like a tool of nourishment and not punishment. So the thing I love about running is it doesn't matter how many times you have to go back to the beginning. Each time there's always that like sense of, oh my God, I can do, if I follow this plan, and if you have mental health issues, this is like structure is really important, right? So if I follow this plan to the letter, I will start to see that I'm able to do something I couldn't do the week before. And that's just so amazing for your self-esteem, And I think the moment that you take out all of that, like about it being about being the fastest or the thinnest or the fittest or whatever, it becomes really joyful. Like, I run for the gains, not the losses. I'm quite slow. And people always say to me, oh, what's your marathon time? And I'm like, what's your marathon time? And they're like, oh, I haven't done one. I was like, exactly, fuck off then,
It's such a weird question.
I know, but people it's almost like they want you to prove that you've actually done it. And I love it. On Saturday I ran 17 miles, which was like hard, but I'm like, I love that I did that. And
do you listen to music while you run, or podcasts?
I listen to a bit of everything. Yeah. And yeah, because it's a long time.
Yeah.
On your feet, you need to.
Yeah, I've only ever done a half marathon once, and I remember podcasts, because music, I just got bored of the same things over and over again. Like, because when I listen to music when I run, I don't feel the same, but I dance in my head.
Yeah, I go into fantasy. I go into total fantasy. So I imagine, this is embarrassing, but I don't care. I imagine that I'm on Strictly and I'm in like musicals week. I've got to musicals week, and like this is actually, and Lin-Manuel Miranda's a guest judge, and I'm dancing to Hamilton or In the Heights, and I like literally I'm high as a kite, and like I get faster. I could do that for hours, I tell you.
There is something about show tunes. I listen to a lot of Wicked soundtracks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I totally. Defying Gravity is like when you'll get like in the last 5K of like a 29K run. I'm like, we need to bring out the show tunes now.
So good.
Because there's nothing else for it. Like I am totally, and sometimes I sing along.
Yeah.
I run running with my friend who's also training me for this challenge, and I'm like, I hold up, put the headphones on now, Vicky, and she just carries on, and she films me, and I'm just like booming out like Dear Evan Hansen, or and then I kind of like, it's between show tunes and Taylor Swift, and she's you look absolutely deranged, Bryony, and I'm like, that's how I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's how you want it. Your second love is reading.
Yes.
When did you first discover that you loved reading? Was there one book that made you think, A, I love reading, or B, this is the book that makes me think I want to be a writer?
I think the first book, this is going to sound like a really weird one, was not quite late on, so I was probably about 15, but it was Lord of the Flies. I always remember Stephen King said that book was like the first book that had arms, and they reached out and grabbed him, and I loved it. I remember sitting it and just being, I love a bit of kind of like end of the world stuff, so I love a bit of Stephen King as well. But reading for me is like, it's like making sense of the world, but also escaping from it, and definitely since I got sober, my evenings are spent now just reading. And I just love it. It's just a different, it's probably a bit of an addiction, but much healthier one.
Yeah. And so do you favor kind of like crime thriller type?
No, I'm very, I'm a bit like, if you looked at my like list, you probably think, she all right. So I love a bit of sci-fi, not like kind of space, but kind of apocalyptic. I just read this book called In Ascension, and it's just so beautiful, like really right sizing, like it kind of, it makes you see the vastness of the world and how lucky we are to be alive and all of that. I love that, but I love a bit of, I've just read Kylie Reid's new novel. I love like a lot of modern, contemporary stuff, but I also am like bang into like a bit of woo-woo.
Oh, I love woo-woo.
I love a bit of woo-woo, like a bit of Louise Hay, completely bonkers. And, but also, things like, a bit of Brené Brown, a bit of like, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, The Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Oh, I haven't read that.
It's just the most magnificent book.
Okay,
and it's all about us women like losing touch with, we've been sort of, we've lost touch with our kind of our feminine, instincts. And she talks about how, we remember that women, apparently women used to be banished when they had their periods to like, and they would have to go and, be alone because they were like dirty. And she said, I can just imagine every woman would like, if we did that now, would walk, turn, leave the house going, and then get around the corner and go, yes! But it's such a good book. So I love a bit of woo as well.
Yeah, I love that. Have you read Untamed?
Yes, of course I have.
So
I mean, I kind of like every month I reread You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, which is, there's a lot of, it's a bit mad. And yeah, so I'm sort of, I'm reading at the moment a really lovely book called The List of Suspicious Things by Jenny Godwin, which is set in the sort of late 70s during the Yorkshire Ripper was on, and it's sort of loosely based on her childhood, of this kind of childhood that was overshadowed by the knowledge of this man who was out, that they didn't know, they didn't know who it was killing women. And it's about two girls of 12 who decide they're going to find out who the Yorkshire Ripper is.
That sounds brilliant.
It's so good.
Okay, I'm going to add that to my list. And your final love for us is skincare, which is definitely a love that I share.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like a bit, given I've got on, like just be happy being you and all that stuff. But okay. So for me, this is like like a sobriety thing, because I used to collapse into bed with like all my makeup on, never wash my face. It was like not knowing where I was and so for me, there's something there's a lovely ritual to like, it's more like I don't think it makes me look any different, and I don't really care how it makes me look, but it's a kind of more an action of like putting this, going through it and getting into bed, and I feel safe.
Talk me through the routine. So is it a nighttime thing? Do you put like a little headband on? What's like the different kind of stages that you go
cleanse,
through?
a double cleanse with a flannel, and then oh my God, I've got an LED mask.
I have one of those. They're so fun.
They're so good.
You look nuts.
You look nuts in them, but I don't care. But I also find them really relaxing.
Yeah. So
I'll put that on for like 20 minutes, read, and then I'll put on like a plumping serum, and then it's some retinol. It's nothing too complex. I do get like I have a Space NK at the bottom of my road, and they do know me in there. They're like, "Hi, Bryony." They bring out all the things.
Oh my God, I think I know the Space NK.
I love space. Like yeah. I literally spend hours in Space NK. I love it. It's just so like, I find it really inclusive. It's like like they're all just really nice in there, and they've got and it's kind of like it's brilliant.
It makes sense though, because I think, like you said, like if you spend so many years not taking care of yourself in any sense, but particularly not taking care of your skin, I suppose, when you're in the grips of addiction, it can be such a soothing, I hate saying self-care because I think that phrase has been so co-opted by TikTok and social media, but it is a really kind of reassuring thing to do, to kind of just look after your skin.
Yeah,
and just have that
and I
ritual
think
every day.
It's more like I don't often wear makeup. I am wearing lots of makeup right now because I've done some television this morning, and obviously because I was coming on your podcast. But for me, it's not about vanity. It's about protecting myself. So like in the morning, that's a more important skincare routine. Again, wash my face and put on but it's it's putting on SPF, because it's like, I don't know, like forming a protective barrier and saying, you're worthy of taking care. It's worth taking care of you and looking after you, and protecting our skin from the sun, because I don't want to get skin cancer. And it's I don't know, there's something sort of like it's a kind of little way in which I say I'm going to look after myself today instead of trying to sabotage myself, which is kind of my instinct when I wake up in the morning. Is how can I, it's like, how can I get out of everything I have to do today? Like, because I'm awful and I want to hide under this duvet. And so it's a little way of sort of counteracting that.
I love that. That's such a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Bryony.
Thank you for having me. I've loved this.
Thank you so much for joining us. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode of Love Lives, you can listen to all episodes on all major podcast platforms, and you can also watch us on independent TV and all social media platforms. I will see you next time. Bye.